is, we got the red arc.
Do it live. I'll write it.
AUDL.
I'll write it. We'll do it live.
What does that mean, play us out?
Look at that. There people are jamming through that arch right now. There's Luke.
Lukey Rennie?
Luke
Check,
Johnson.
check.
Luke Johnson used to be an athlete, former athlete, current awkward jogger.
Hey, Chuck Down, why don't you show us some of your boxing moves while we're waiting for this game to start?
Yeah, you want to roll your shoulders when you're throwing those uppercuts. So you want to actually get the motion in the upper part of your torso. You want to roll it, okay? A lot of people, they tend to put a lot of strain on their lower back. They're not really activating the legs.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Championship Sunday at the AUDL's Championship Weekend. We are live from our game day set, getting ready for the New York Empire and the Dallas Roughnecks in the 8th championship game of the American Ultimate Disc League with Ian Toner, Charlie Eisenhood, Chuck Kittredge, Megan Tormey. I am Evan Lepler. It is a sweltering Sunday here in San Jose.
It's hot.
I don't know. I live in Dallas now. This isn't sweltering to me, and I guarantee the Roughnecks feel the same way. This is cool.
Megan says no sweltering. Chuck, sweltering or not?
Sweltering, especially up here.
Absolutely not sweltering. There's no humidity here. It's beautiful out.
Ian?
Not sweltering, but
Wow.
the sun's really beating down on you.
Whatever.
These two
Lived in the bank too
teams
long.
both advanced yesterday. The New York Empire, a 2-goal win and what felt like a 5-goal win. And the Dallas Roughnecks, a 5-goal win that felt kind of more like a 2-goal win. And now we get this matchup that we anticipated coming into the weekend could be a classic. Ian, as you hit the pillow last night, what was your thinking at in terms of these two teams matching up? For the second time in 2 years at Championship Weekend, they scored 62 goals last year in a 32-30 Dallas victory.
Well, if I can fast forward to after my head hit the pillow and when Charlie and I had breakfast this morning, we were talking about how different the Dallas backfield is compared to when these two teams faced off last year. Last year, we had Matt Jackson, Mr. Consistency, getting a lot of touches in the backspace. You had Brandon Malachek, who's going to be a healthy scratch. And now the volume of those touches are going to be dominated by Dalton Smith, Henry Ferruda, likely Abe Coffin. How much better is this Dallas backfield compared to where it was last year? And is that enough to overtake the superpower, the star-studded talents of the New York Empire?
Well, you think last year Kai Marshall was banged up, didn't play at Championship Weekend. Jay Frood played mostly offense. Those are two weapons that Dallas has to throw at New York's uber-talented O-line with Grant Lindsley, Ben Yott, Bo Kittredge if he plays O again, obviously Jack Williams, Harper Garvey, Connor Klein. I mean, it's a fascinating question how Dallas is going to match up with New York today.
And that's where I think that Indy failed. They just didn't have quite enough tools to match up against all of the offensive power that the New York Empire has. And I feel like Dallas has a few more tools in the toolbox to put against New York, and I think they're going to take New York out of their comfort zone. I'm very curious to see how New York handles that.
Charlie, that was a bee that just landed
That
on
was
your head.
massive. That
Very
wasn't
intense.
like a little fly. That was a queen
I
bee.
felt something, and then and I saw the bee, and I'm glad that I'm all right.
That would have terrified. I would have shrieked. Chuck, nothing scares you.
Not a bee, not a man.
Does this New York-Dallas matchup scare you at all?
I'm so excited to watch this game. I mean, honestly, that semi last year was so fun to watch. And I don't know. I mean, I heard you talking about them trying to get blocks on New York. Have fun trying to do that, you know. I think this is going to be a shootout. I'm hoping this is just going to be a shootout. And there's not going to be a lot of blocks, I don't think. And the wind, I mean, I guess the wind might pick up. Right now it's not too bad, but I'm expecting to see some really highlight reel offensive sequences.
Well, one thing that the New York guys said is that they have, I think both teams feel like they have more energy in the final than they did last year because both these teams played 62 points in the semifinals last year. Yesterday, New York played 32 points. Dallas played 41. Very big difference from 62.
Huge difference, and I think that's good for fans because I think we're going to get a hotly contested final. You know, it's interesting. I was looking back at last year's game, the Dallas 32-30 win, and the lineups for both teams are different, but I think New York is more different. Last year, Ben Yot gets going with 5 goals and 5 assists early. I mean, he was dominant in the first half, and they started to just back him and put a last back in their defense, and that really worked to disrupt New York's offense. I don't know that that's going to work this year. They're going to have another game plan, because when you add Jack Williams and Grant Lindsley to the lineup, all of a sudden you have players who are very comfortable working underneath and picking you apart. So, I think that's going to be the challenge for Dallas, is that this is a very different New York team. And you're not going to be able to just take Ben Yot out of the equation and win the game. And that worked last year because he was really their only super dynamic player. And now they have at least 3 of them.
And scored 15 of their 30 goals last year.
Right.
And if I can play devil's advocate, we talked about the difference in Dallas's backfield, their O-line backfield coming into this game. Look how much deeper their defensive depth chart is compared to when these two teams met in the playoffs last year. Kevin Richardson might play some offense, might cross over to some defense. Dan Emmons is healthy. He went down in that semifinal last year. Jay Frood has been playing a lot more defense. Kai Marshall has been playing a lot more defense. Those are 3 big body defenders that are conceivably going to be able to take bigger matchups and take bigger minutes, and not just simply roll over in front of Lindsley or Williams or others.
This will be the second ever meeting between these two franchises, and Bo Kittredge was a loser the first time around. He's still looking to beat Jim Garancer for the first time. Now in 2017, Dallas did not meet Bo in the finals. They lost to Toronto. But what's on the line for Bo Kittredge today, Chuck?
Well, I mean, I think Bo's legacy is on the line today. I think he likes it that way, and yeah, he's the kind of guy. He'll hang back as long as he can, and when you need him, he'll be there. And I think I was talking to the owners of these two franchises last night about kind of the gravitas that Bo has and how he's certainly not making the best plays anymore, but when he's out there, especially the younger guys are confident. And I think as soon as he moved to New York had a confidence that they'd never had before. I mean, they were notorious for blowing it. And then last year he showed up and somehow they made it through Toronto for the first time in an elimination playoff game. That's just not a coincidence. I mean, he's a special guy.
Charlie, you've been a historian of the sport as much as anybody. Obviously, Bo isn't the same player that he was a decade ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. How does his presence, from your perspective, change the way people perceive New York and the way they perceive themselves?
Well, I think Bo is still a star in the league. That's one thing. People see Bo on the team. As soon as it was announced that he was going to be playing for the Empire, and that was huge news. And, talking to Coach Brian Jones, he brings a sense of winning, as Chuck is pointing out, like a gravitas about what it means to be a champion, because he can credibly say, we can win this game. I know here's how we're going to do it. And people are going to listen to him in the huddle. And New York hadn't really had that before, ever. So to have somebody in the huddle who's done as much winning as he has, regardless of what he does on the field, he's going to have the ability to step into the huddle and say, we're going to go out and we're going to win this game. Here's how we're going to do it, and let's go get it.
So one of our broadcasting colleagues that isn't with us today, because he returned to action for the Chicago Wildfire, is Kurt Gibson. And Kurt and Bo are often compared and contrasted a bunch. And Ian, I'm curious to ask you, when Kurt Gibson joined your club team in 2014, you guys were crazy talented. But I think Kurt and Bo are similar in a bunch of different ways. How did Kurt's presence impact the confidence of that Johnny Bravo team in 2014 in the USAU club division?
I think we just knew that it was on us to go out and play like the champions that we knew we could be. And there was certainly huge talent and huge threat from Revolver, and sure, we didn't face them in the bracket that year, and we lost to them in the semis at World Clubs, but there was we couldn't make any excuses about not having enough pieces, or not having enough talent, or not having enough experience. And, being honest, it took a while for the leadership to figure out exactly which pieces fit on which line. Are we going to use Lance on the O-line or Lance on the D-line? Is Kurt going to settle into the O-line? Is Brody going to settle into the O-line? That was something that we struggled with until late into the year, but, our leadership figured it out when it mattered, and got all the pieces together, in time for the end of regionals and nationals, and things went the way that we wanted. But it wasn't an overnight process. It was a season-long building effort.
I just checked Dylan Larberg's Twitter, and there's nothing too controversial on there. He is typically known to spice things up a little bit. There was one tweet this morning basically letting people know that there was another big matchup with New York and Dallas tonight. How does Dylan Larberg shape the way you view this Roughnecks team, and how he has evolved from 2016 when he was a relatively unknown guy who actually played really well at championship weekend and was one of the reasons they beat the Seattle Cascades in the finals that year? How has his mentality galvanized this Roughnecks group?
Well, he exemplifies the fire that we can expect from the Dallas Roughnecks and the poise with which he carries himself, right? Like, he knows that he belongs on this field regardless of what anyone else feels or thinks, and that confidence shows in the way he attacks his opponent, right? No one's better than him. He can get the disc. And when you have that mentality, it does enable you to make plays that you might not be able to make because there's no self-doubt slowing you down. And to answer the second part of your question about how he's evolved, like, certainly making smarter decisions, but still with the same, like, trigger reflex that we've seen all along. But last night, I mean, all his throws were on the money.
I think the important thing to remember about Dylan, he is a Texas product through and through. He came out of the UT Austin system, helped that team achieve nationals level success in the college scene. And then at a time when Jim Garanser was founding the Roughnecks and bringing in all of this out-of-state talent and importing players from around the country, Dylan was one of the original local homegrown guys that actually earned a spot on the roster and made an impact despite the other players who might have been brought in conceivably higher than him on the depth chart. And I think ever since that 2016 championship, he's been hungry to say, yeah, look, this is a program and I'm a player who can do it without those guys.
Chuck, you a Dylan Larberg fan?
Yeah, he reminds me of a more palatable Dylan Freechild.
Oh my goodness.
Like, they're both kind of frenetic, very, very talented, have endless self-belief, and they can be irritating when they're crushing you. But yeah, I'm a Larberg fan. Yesterday he played. I mean, he also throws wrong-footed a lot, which I find just fascinating. It's really hard to do that, and he does it all the time, and it's just impressive.
I mean, one of his flick hucks was like he laid out as he threw it,
Yeah,
committing to the throw, and, like stall one.
If you play Ultimate, you know how hard it is to do that, and he does it constantly. It's very, very fun to watch.
Yeah, this Roughnecks team has kind of been galvanized by his presence, and look, I think Brian Jones is counting on the fact that Dallas is going to do some of what he calls their stylish throws. And I think the Empire's game plan is if they can get blocks on one or two of those early, it can dramatically change Dallas's swagger and their willingness to take those shots the rest of the game.
Yeah, it seems like there's a confidence zero-sum game here where, yeah, if they can get some big blocks, and they can, I'm talking about New York, they can take some of Dallas's confidence away and put it in their corner. I feel like both these teams are confident, but it does just sort of seem like this could be two heavyweights just doing body blows for the first half, and then somebody's going to go down. It's just a question of who's going to break.
Well, that was my next question. Are you guys expecting an early run by one of these two teams? Do you think they're trading punches and it's pretty close before someone can break away? We saw early runs from both these teams yesterday.
I find it hard to see this game, getting out of hand at all. I think if either team gets a 4-point lead, I'd be surprised. I think it's going to be close throughout. I think both teams have the ability to stack a line and go out and get an offensive hold whenever they need one. So it's going to be a matter of, who can play the most consistent over the course of the game. And we saw yesterday both teams struggling with consistency a little bit in terms of just going 4 quarters of strong play. And so, that I think the team that does a better job of staying consistent is probably the team that's going to walk away with a win. But you could easily see this game going to overtime. I think it's going to be a great battle.
Ian, what one-on-one matchup are you most excited to see?
I mean, this is I feel like a cop-out because it's at the top of everyone's mind, but probably Ben Yacht and Kai Marshall. I'd also love to see Jay Frood on Benyat. Frood's clearly given up a couple of inches, but he knows how to play well against guys that are bigger than him. I think this game, though, is going to be decided. Sure, we might get a highlight or two out of one of those matchups. I think this game is going to be decided on the backfield matchups. Who gets the assignment of Dalton Smith? Is that a Josh Aloro assignment? Does Jabron Meeser or Jeff Babbitt, somebody with a huge frame, get thrown on a Henry Ferruta just to try and, out-athlete them or make them work a little harder in those efforts to distribute? I think the highlight reel potential is there for, a Frood or a Marshall on a yacht, but I think the deciding factor is going to come down to those backfield matchups.
Megan, any matchups you're particularly excited about?
I don't think that was a cop-out, Ian. I think everybody wants to see it, so it's a very
okay,
fair answer.
Good.
Right,
Thank you.
Right. I'm curious to see Dylan Larberg, I imagine, on like a Grant Lindsley or Jack Williams.
Sure.
Seeing who and how they'll take them out of the game, or attempt to.
Yeah. Dylan Larberg he's kind of that like NBA irrational confidence guy. Like when he's matched up with Jack or Grant, he's going to expect to win that matchup, even though we consider those two guys among the best in the world at what they do. I don't know if that's
Dylan Larberg totally has the capability of outplaying either of those guys in the matchup. And I think, you saw last night, he's got one of the quickest triggers on a hammer in the league. I mean, he'll just be standing there and then boom, throw a 40-yard hammer, 50-yard hammer across field, perfect shot. And I think that's the thing I wonder about Dylan, not whether he's going to play good defense. We know that. Will he be able to contribute the same way on offense as he did yesterday? If he, like I said last night, if he does that, I think Dallas is going to have a great chance to win. He's one of their most dynamic players after the turn.
We welcome those of you who just joined us at UDL Game Day Live with Ian, Chuck, Charlie, Megan, and Evan in no particular order. The Roughnecks in the Empire, both victorious yesterday by 2-goal and 5-goal margins, respectively, and now the 8th AUDL championship game. And hey, we have not had overtime in an AUDL championship game before. This feels like a game, the matchup, pretty close on paper. It'd be fun.
Yeah, and certainly I don't think any of us would be surprised. Talk about Dallas's confidence. I feel like New York is equally confident. They've won so many tight games this year, and in Louis Zatzman's interview with Matt Stevens talked about that game, I believe it was in June against the DC Breeze, where they were down. They didn't have to win. It wouldn't have mattered in the standings, and yet they took it upon themselves to come back from a deficit and win that game. And I think that was really eye-opening for a lot of New York Empire players. Like, oh man, when we decide to turn it on, we dictate the nature of this game. And the swagger that we're going to see from Dallas is likely to get them some blocks, likely to get them some breaks, but I don't think it's going to get New York completely out of their rhythm, and so New York's going to answer back with a lot of grit and determination as well.
Another thing that we would talk about, how the handler situation has changed from last year to this year with Dallas. You could argue the same thing with New York, because Harper Garvey's a very different player than he was a year ago. He takes care of the disc at a whole different level than last year, and it's really made him into just a super solid rock for this Empire offense.
Yeah, and the difference really is he's just being asked to do less. Last year he had to be the hooker. He had to be the guy who did it all from the backfield. That was their primary offensive, backfield presence. And now he can share that load with others. So whether that's Grant Lindsley in continuation or, other players in the backfield who are going to huck more than he has to, it's so much easier when you have that much talent on the line with you, because all of a sudden you're not the one who's being asked to make all of the tough throws. And he can be more of a possession handler. He's obviously capable of unleashing a 75-yard forehand bomb, and he will, but he also can just break the mark and be the guy who gets it to the cutters downfield, who are all capable of then throwing the huck and getting the score. And that's what's made New York's offense so deadly when they're playing their best game.
Wind has picked up a little bit, even since we sat down here, which feels good in the sweltering Sunday heat.
Sweltering.
It's not sweltering.
Sweltering.
It is hot.
You don't know.
Does the wind play to either team's advantage in anyone's mind?
I think it plays a little bit more to New York's advantage. I think Dallas likes to take slightly more crafty, creative, risky throws, and Wynn has a greater impact on upside-down throws than puts to space, which I think is a little more New York's bread and butter.
Yeah, I wonder. So, I don't know why this keeps coming to my head, but I wonder if, what are the chances Dalton Smith has a bad game today? Because every once in a while he has just a bad game, and I don't have that question in my head with Ben Katz or Harper Garvey as much, but with Dalton Smith, I just sometimes under the spotlight, under pressure, he can wow you and he can really be flat too. So I'm wondering if that happens, what does Dallas can do? Or some of you guys have covered him more than I have. What do you think the chances of Dalton coming out flat today are?
The way he's been playing, I don't know that I necessarily see it. And my main concern about New York, and it's been this way all season, is their handler defense. I don't think it's, they have such strong players everywhere else. Great offense, great cutter defenders, but their handler defenders aren't the best in the league, and I think that's going to make it challenging for them to try to take Dalton out of a rhythm. Of course, it's always possible that any player could go out and have a bad game, but I feel like we've generally seen Dalton play some of his best ultimate in the biggest spots. And, he looked great yesterday.
He looked great.
I feel like I would share more of your concern or be less confident if he was being asked to do so many different things for this Dallas team and he was bouncing back and forth between the D-line and the O-line frequently. But the last couple games, he's just settled in. Wes Nemec has dialed in those offensive lines. He knows exactly what his role is, and he's not asked to do incredible things. He's asked to distribute, and that's a role that he excels in. I have confidence in him performing well.
Yeah, it seems like year over year, Harper Garvey and Dalton Smith have settled in, have more support, and seem like safer bets this year than last. Is that fair? To me, they do.
They're definitely playing with a lot more consistency and not that same high variance we saw last year. Can I just bring up something that no one seemed to have talked about yet? Wes Nemec, I feel like, is on the short list for Coach of the Year right now.
Oh my gosh, Ian said the exact same thing on the broadcast last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Hang on. Evan, how do you feel about that?
I think it's fair.
Okay.
What, did I react negatively to the...
Well, I feel like you have...
Well,
you may have a contrarian opinion.
Well, the Dallas Roughnecks were 38-4 in their first 3 years as a franchise in the regular season, and then went 8-4 this year in the regular season.
Who cares about the regular season?
Well, that's the question. He's certainly the coach of championship weekend so far, and the coach of the playoffs. But I care about the regular season.
I
wrote
like
50,000 million words about the regular season.
But I'm just saying, look at their losses. They have some road losses and back-to-backs, and they may not have been the same dominant team, but that's, to me, what's impressive about his ability to come in and take over a situation where it's not exactly clear where you need to deploy your players. You have a different-looking team. You're going up against a Raleigh team that's better than you all year, and to then come out and not only win the South, but look amazing in that game. And it's the little tactical things, too. In-game adjustments, always seems to call timeout before a turnover. It's uncanny how often he does that.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just extremely impressive to see that from somebody who's not considered an elite coach or has been around. You talk about Brian Jones, you talk about Darryl Stanley, Mike DeNardis. These are coaches who have cachet over years and years, and Wes Nemec, it's like, oh, who's Wes Nemec? But here he is, out coaching in the South Division game against Mike DeNardis and that coaching staff in Raleigh.
I don't know. I think it certainly puts him on the radar for next season, because this season I think that a lot of what you said, the similar credit could be given to Brian Jones, making switches over lines, in-game decisions. Evan has talked all season about how the New York Empire are undefeated, but it's not like they've been as dominant as the 2016 Dallas Roughnecks, and that comes down to squeezing the most out of your talent, and that seems to be a knack that Brian Jones has had all season long.
I'm not sure this is something that the Dallas Roughnecks veterans are worried about today. They just want to win the title. That's their main motivation. But if you think deeper about it, no team has been undefeated since the 2016 Roughnecks. New York's going for that today. Who do they go against? The team that did it 3 years ago that has the path to stop them.
So I feel like the experience across the Empire roster, I don't think this is something that they're going to let distract them. It may be something that they had a team meeting about and said, hey, we're acknowledging that this is out there, but in probably boring Frisbee player talk, they're probably saying, hey, we're not going to talk about this again, and we're going to focus on the point in front of us. And we're going to focus on process goals 1, 2, and 3, and we're not going to mention, what is on the line. I can imagine that's probably how it was addressed with that team.
Ian and Megan, in just a couple minutes, you guys will break with me up to the booth. Chuck and Charlie, you'll be joined by a couple dignitaries here to take us to the top of the hour. I'll let Chuck and Charlie hold off on making their picks until we get closer to the top of the hour. But Ian and Megan, I want to give you a chance on the game day show to make a pick.
I'm sticking with my change last night. I'm going with Dallas.
By how many?
That's tough. No more than 2, maybe a 1-point victory.
I think Dallas is a 1.5 goal favorite coming into this game. I'm going to say Dallas wins by 2.
See, it's interesting that you say Dallas is the favorite. I still feel like New York deserves to be considered the favorite. They're the undefeated team. They have this incredible high ceiling of top talent that's really hard to stop. But I do think the difference in the game is going to be Dallas's depth. The 11 to 20 on the roster. And I would say, we talked about it last night, New York, maybe a 1.5 point favorite. I'm not sure if there are official odds up this morning. I've not seen. But I think, I predicted Dallas by 2 in the podcast. I'll take Dallas by 2. My hope is we get double overtime. And I don't care who wins.
Yeah. I would love that.
No one would have a problem with that.
No, that would give Wes Nemec and Brian Jones some gray hair, perhaps. And Chuck, would you get a few more grays if that happened? Or?
There's no room. But yeah, I know one person who would mind, and that's Bo. Bo would like to have this over in regulation. If that's a possibility.
Yeah, he has places to be. Well, we thank you for being with us on this Game Day Live show. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, Charlie and Chuck will be here on the couch, joined by a couple AUDL dignitaries. Mike Denardis, coach of the Raleigh Flyers. He's got some perspective on how to handle the Dallas Roughnecks. And Darryl Stanley of the DC Breeze. Perhaps no one gave the New York Empire as many fits this year as well. So it's Chuck, Charlie, Mike, and Darryl. When we return, myself, Ian, and Megan headed to the booth. AUDL championship game about 30 minutes away, coming up on Stadium. Talk to you soon.
On the backside, misplays it, and a huge leg. Go, Gadget legs. Man, that was sick. Oh, what a grab. Whoa, lays out on Kittredge. Getting it right back with the rock. That D was crazy. Oh, and Lloyd catches, flips it into the end zone, and the referees say it counts. That was unbelievable. Shen, can he throw it the full 80 yards of the field? Are you kidding me? You are kidding me! Holy smokes! A huge error. Mesnick to the end zone. Knocked away. Seconds. Shen, can he throw it the full 80 yards of the field? Are you kidding me? You are kidding me! Holy smoke! Gets it off. Oh, and Lloyd catches, flips it into the end zone, and the referees say it counts. That was unbelievable. The rush score, they win. Scuba caught. Toronto has prevailed on the road. To the end zone, knocked away. So, a behind-the-back flip. Did he really throw this behind his back? Oh my goodness. We've got everything here.
Welcome back to Game Day Live. Thanks so much for joining us. And look, we have a special bonus guest. We were all getting set for Raleigh Flyers coach Mike DeNardis, DC Breeze coach Daryl Stanley, but Bill Nye is here. Bill Nye, the science guy, who's going to be doing the coin toss and then throwing a signed disc into the stands.
Into the stands, yes, sir.
Bill, so glad to have you here. How are you doing? Are you excited for the championship game?
Oh, yeah. So everybody, I started playing Ultimate in 1973. Because I went to college with guys who are from Columbia, New Jersey, Columbia High School, Teaneck, New Jersey. And so I love the game. The only team sport in which the offense cannot score unassisted. And today, the wind is going to be a deal.
Yeah.
You're going to swing around and get a shot of that flag. And right now it's calm. But every few seconds we get a big swirl, right? So what does that mean, people? People still pick up pieces of grass and let it go? Sure we do.
Sure.
So what does that mean when you got the swirling wind, the jumping disc?
Oh, I mean, honestly, the players will have a really tough time making any sort of understanding of where the wind is consistent, right?
So what do you do?
Honestly, I think keep the disc low.
Keep it low.
Yeah.
And he gets this guy, Kai Marshall.
Isn't he something?
He's like this one guy. Were they playing with 7 guys? So it's going to be a heck of a contest. And I think, like last night and yesterday afternoon, it's going to be one turnover, one bobble. One going to throw it before you've caught it. You know what I mean? One foot block that nobody expected.
Well, this is a fun matchup. There's a lot of really tall receivers on both teams, and sometimes when you're thrown in the wind, they pop up. And then you get my favorite thing in the world, which is a total nightmare. Everybody trying to sky everybody at the same time.
I feel like you'd be really good at that, Chuck. You were a pretty tall guy.
Pretty good at that.
Yep.
I was durable.
Yep.
Now
It's
there's
like,
no
he was like
contact.
Barkley.
There's no
Barkley out
contact in
there.
Ultimate.
No.
No, doesn't happen.
Non-contact.
Especially when you play on concrete,
I started playing on asphalt.
Yeah.
I mean, we all did. And I used to play with a Pluto platter. Does that mean anything to anybody?
Yeah. Sure.
They just didn't fly as well as a modern disc. So
You didn't play with pie tins?
Yeah, pie tins.
the pie tins was
Yeah.
later on. I have a couple souvenirs you buy at the trade show. Sure. They're not rare. But it's going to be a great game, you guys. I'm very excited about this.
Who do you like in the game?
Well, I would have said Dallas, but I'm not joking you, because New York's had another half day of rest. I think it's whoever can control the disc and keep it low. When you start doing the long game going, because you're going to go against the wind every other play, whoever can keep it low, keep it under control, I think is going to happen. That's easy to say. So who's going to win? I don't know, man. That's why we got to play. The disc is round. Anything can happen.
Well, Mike, I'm going to throw it over to you. You watch this Dallas team look a little pedestrian during the season and then come out in the South Championship game and look like a different team. What changed for them, do you think?
I think the urgency of the moment. That team, when they have to win, they know what to do. They do the simple really well. They play at a high rate, and you saw it in our game. They look like a different team because they play like a different team. They know the beginning of the games are super important, and in our game, they went up by 4. They won by 4 to start the game, and it's just one of those things where they understand the urgency of coming out hot, and that's what they do almost every important game. You're gonna see it. They're gonna throw the kitchen sink at these guys early.
Is it true that they were looking at film and they adjusted their offense?
We all look at film, so I hope they were. But I think it's one of those things where those game days when you're traveling, it's nice to have that intimate setting where you can kind of look at it all together and get on the same page right away. And obviously, it worked for them when they were in Raleigh.
So last night, San Diego just got tired, and they started pushing it. So when you mentioned that thing about coming out hard at the beginning, but you got to stay hard all the way through.
They do. They're physical. They're fast. You saw the plays that they can make, and they don't stop. And if anything, they come out hot, and then they give you a little breather maybe in the second and third quarters. In the fourth quarter, it's right back to the super intense, super physical game. Sometimes it gets a little ugly, and that's where you just have to be kind of mentally strong.
There was a couple of. There was one in particular foul that didn't seem like a foul to me, but that's part of the game. You can't let that get to you. You got to just. Thank you, Coach Bill. Yeah, of course. No, but you just got to keep playing when stuff like that happens. There's the win, people. So you can't see it, everybody, but the flag is almost still. But where we're sitting, the wind is quite strong or quite noticeable, and that's when you get that hopping disc.
Right. We saw a lot of drops yesterday in that.
Two hands, people. 2 hands. Don't make me come over there.
Daryl, DC came very close to some wins over New York this year. New York seems to have a problem with when they get a lead, maintaining that lead. And we saw it yesterday against Indianapolis. Is that a risk for them today? Let's say they do come out and get a couple of breaks early on, are they susceptible to letting Dallas march back in and then steal the game from them?
I think that's a really good point. New York has, I think they've had a little bit of trouble trying to keep motivation. They're beating a lot of teams. They know that there's a switch that they can turn on a lot of the time and take over a game. I think the trouble is, and you're right about Dallas, like the speed, the athleticism, the skill that they have is probably. Raleigh would be maybe one of the only exceptions that they've seen this year of a team that can just turn it on like that. So I think they are a little bit susceptible, but at the same time, they're really good about finding little things to motivate themselves in the middle of a game. It could be, a missed call. It could be, a dropped disc. It could be, anything like that. And all of a sudden, they're just really amped up for each other, and then they get themselves back into it.
One turnover.
Right.
One bobble. Mark my words, people. Do you think it's going to be close or not close?
I think it's going to be very close.
I think it's going to be 2 points anyway.
Yeah. I think the line was 1.5, right?
New York minus 1.5.
Yeah.
Well, it does seem like
right?
New York sort of plays to the level of their competition a little bit. So I'm wondering if we're going to see a best version of New York today because they're playing a really hot team that can keep it going for 4 quarters usually.
Let's be honest. Indianapolis should have lost by 10 yesterday. And
I think so.
New York just completely relaxed in the second half.
Well, when you're playing in a tournament, you got to do that.
Right.
When you got tomorrow's game.
yourself.
Yeah, you got to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. And what I love about Ultimate, just overall, is, the death by penalty kick. Like you've been playing in soccer, you've been playing for an hour and a half, and then there's a penalty kick and it's over. But in Ultimate, it's never like that because there's never a situation. You can put all the defenders standing. They can be locked arms. They can be Roman legions with the shields with hooks on them, but you can just hammer it over them or whatever. It's never over. I love that.
Right. Mike, you saw this New York team this year. It was a great game. Super close. Do you think that this New York team is beatable by this Dallas Roughnecks team?
Absolutely. they're super talented, but I think, when you get to this moment both the teams are amazingly skilled, and it's really who desires it more at this point in time. And like I said, Dallas is going to be super motivated going into this game, and New York can't fall into that trap. And they're definitely beatable, and it's all about that, how they come out of the gates. And
So
I think that's going to determine a lot of the game.
Here's my claim. It's going to be execution in the wind.
Yeah,
Completing
absolutely.
passes in the wind. It's going to be a couple of drops, a couple of miscues in the wind, and that's going to turn it.
I think an interesting kind of side note to that is Dallas plays in heavy winds all season long. So they're more comfortable in this environment. Not that New York's not windy, but when you go to Dallas's stadiums or their home games, every game you got a 10-plus mile-an-hour wind. Some are 30.
That's true.
So they're very ready for this. A 15-mile-an-hour wind's just like home to them.
Oh, so there it's done.
What's Dallas's greatest strength and greatest weakness?
Dallas's greatest strength, just their fire. Like they're definitely not as skilled on the top end as New York. New York's got some elite players, and Dallas has obviously some very skillful players. But it's just their motivation to across the board to maximize their talent from 1 to 20, and they do it really well. Like every player maximizes their ability when they're playing hot. When they're not, like they have hiccups. You saw some of it last night where they were throwing reset turnovers and simple mistakes, and that can happen with them. But when they're playing at their top end, everyone's just on all cylinders. There's fire there, and it's hard to stop them.
Would you say their greatest weakness is those hiccups?
Yeah, I mean, the high highs, low lows,
Right.
like they're capable of that for sure.
Daryl, how about for New York? Biggest strength, biggest weakness?
I would say its patience is the greatest strength. They're really content to work the disc a lot underneath, swing it a lot of times. I mean, and their D-line also manifests that patience by saying, hey, even if we don't get the break on this point, the fact that we made their O-line work really hard, we'll get that next point. And they really honestly believe that, and that's what keeps them just, staying in that mindset of not making gambles and just kind of playing the long game. And I think their weakness is probably,
Playing the long game with short passes is what you're saying.
Yeah. The long and short of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, their weakness, I would say like their quickness to temper, maybe. I think Dallas is a team that has some fiery characters who can really get you riled up, and they like that, and they can play well in that. And I think New York thinks they can play well in that, but I have seen it go both ways for them. So
We have seen some of their play. I mean, Grant Lindsley got irritated, and Chuck was talking about this in the booth. Got irritated after some physical contact yesterday and then made a mistake or two.
Yeah, he really doesn't play his best. He's kind of that zen, really smiling-faced assassin guy. If you make him upset, I mean, a lot of times he'll play out of himself a little bit. He had a kind of a weird foul into the back, just a weird, a hammer that was going nowhere that he committed a foul on. And the other guy who got upset was Babbitt, which is funny because he's like
Very
literally
upset.
a mountain on the field. But somebody fouled him into the back, and you could tell it upset him. And they're going to get touched up a little bit by Dallas.
And Dallas has a tendency to get under team skin.
100%.
Yes.
That's
Don't I
definitely-
know?
How do they do that?
Don't I know?
Well, I think
Just talking to them?
Have you ever been to Dallas?
Talking smack. I spent a lot of time in
physicality.
Physicality.
And
irritating town.
I think it's also frustrating to get layout D'd by Kai Marshall.
Yeah.
But also the physicality, a little trash talk maybe. They're not the nicest guys out there, I would say.
Not when they're playing.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be something interesting to pay attention to. Like, who sets the tone of the game early on, and are they going to be able? Who's going to control the pace? I think that's going to be a big question. One thing I want to come back to is this game going to look like last year's semifinal? Dallas wins 32-30, and Ben Yot had a huge game, but Dallas adjusted in the second half, started taking away the deep shot. Are we going to see that play out again, or is this going to look like a totally different game?
Man, I hope it's the same. I really enjoyed that game.
Shootout.
Yeah.
I think the wind, like Bill's been talking about, means that that's probably not likely, right? Both games yesterday, didn't reach the 20s. So,
Yeah, a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teams started to realize that the sideline, the right-hand sideline for me at the moment, is it's a crosswind, right? And that's where, if you're throwing against that from the right side of the field to the left side of the field, that's an upwind throw. And teams are starting to figure that out, double team a lot. And you saw just a lot of turnovers on that side of the field. I think if both teams come to that conclusion quickly, there could be a lot of turnovers in this game, and it'll be more of a battle of, who can maybe move the disc off that sideline faster, and who can capitalize on the short field turnovers.
But I said since the beginning of Ultimate, defense is the key.
Also,
the guy's always open long. He's always open.
I think you see also 2 better tacticians this year with Brian, and Wes has done a better job with game planning for specific strategies, where last year was a track meet. It was a lot of matchup D, so it was, they were firing on all cylinders. Brian's definitely not going to let that happen, and Wes has done a better job preventing those things. So I think you'll see a little more prevent Ds where they're not giving the deep up right away, and they're making them throw a couple passes. So I think that's going to add to the, potential of a lower score.
Mm-hmm. Bill, if you're going to give some advice to the newer generation of Ultimate players, what would you tell them?
Concentrate on defense. Defense is what wins games. At this level, everybody can throw both sides or over the top. Everybody. Just get that thing where you look like the guy's open, make the thrower think the guy's open, but you're poaching. And just juke him. That's I think that's always been my weakness as a player, is just that you got to have that quickness on defense, because the offense is there. And then, even though you want it to look cool, catch with 2 hands when it's windy, even though you want it to look super cool.
I mean, we saw drops, maybe not decide the game yesterday, but Indianapolis had so many drops. I think they had 6 drops in that first semifinal, and it could have been a different game if they didn't have some of those drops.
Two drops, 2 missed plays is going to be the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Bill predicts.
So, if you look at each of the O-lines on these teams, and maybe I'll ask this to the coaches here, who do you pick as the better O-line?
I know my answer already.
I do too.
New York.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about D-line?
Dallas.
That's a tough one.
I mean, that's if you're asking.
I think Dallas has more speed.
Right.
They're going to have more speed, more physicality. I don't know if they're technically better, because once again, having Brian as your coach, the sets are going to be a little more polished, I think. So I think the ability is Dallas, but the constructs and the sets might be New York.
So interesting yesterday watching New York. Shoe taking a timeout early when they got a turnover in the first half.
Yeah.
They didn't take the timeout to put the O-line on the field. They let the defense play. You expect to see similar today, or are we going to see teams with breaks potentially at a premium, depending on how the offenses play? We're going to see early timeouts. I know you've talked to Brian about this and just strategically when to use those timeouts. What do you think?
I mean, he's going to keep his ethos, right? I mentioned it yesterday in the pregame, the body blows concept. For them, New York says, that's that patience I was talking about. That's their D-line patience. They're saying, if I can wear you down, we can have a multi-turn point. You're going to run out the same 7 or 8 O-liners the next point. My O-line's probably going to put it in. It's probably going to do it quickly. And if we do, that pressure's back on you, right? That battle of energy and focus is back on you. I'm going to send out my next D-line. We're going to throw a little bit of a wrinkle at you. We're going to make sure you don't score quickly, and let's see if you can go do it again. So I'm very confident he will not call a timeout early in, I would say either the first quarter or the third quarter to try to get his breaks. But in the second quarter and the fourth quarter, you saw his mentality changed. He called those timeouts twice, actually, in the second quarter of the game against Indy.
Right.
And put the O-line in, and they got the breaks. So.
Did yesterday's games affect the way that you think about today? Or do you feel like from what you saw coming into the weekend, you feel similarly about the matchup now? And do you feel like you saw anything yesterday that
I just
makes you...
think Dallas is a lot better than I realized.
Okay. Yeah. Having watched them against San Diego.
I'm not at your level, but Dallas has just got a lot more than I thought they had.
Yeah, I was watching on the ground. The speed of Dallas really impressed me yesterday. I mean, that second game, watching them fly around like that, I was, I've been on the ground a lot in 70 Pro, and I've never seen a team maybe move that fast.
Wow.
And San Diego is not a slow team.
No,
they have some speed.
They ran out, man. They ran out of steam late in the game.
Yeah, and ostensibly they have the best offense at that's championship weekend. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at their hold percentage and the way that they played this season, but I mean, they gave up tons of breaks yesterday to Dallas, and that's that Dallas defense just.
You guys know more about it. Was it because Dallas had a better rotation, changing players more tactically? Is that what it was?
In that game specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they change anything they normally do. I think it's just they keep mounting pressure through a game because they are physical and they're always on your hip. They're always applying pressure, so it wears you down through the 4 quarters.
Yep.
You know what's interesting to me is that, New York goes up against defenses that are just in the East that are not as good as this Dallas defense is going to be. But I think that Dallas goes up against, at least Raleigh, as a team that really pushes them all season.
Yeah.
And I was talking about this yesterday that, some of the teams like San Diego and Indianapolis are coming out of divisions where there's just not as much talent and they're not going to be ready for the pressure that they see from the teams. And I think we saw that a little bit yesterday. Is there a chance that New York gets punched in the mouth a little bit early because they're just not used to playing against defense of the caliber that Dallas is going to bring?
First, my DC Breeze at home are looking at you and your New York bias. In all fairness, we do our best, right, to challenge New York, and New York was pressured a lot, so I'll push back a little. But to that end, I would say that, New York, this is their second championship weekend.
That's true.
That matters. I think that they've started to see, and obviously Brian is here now this year. That's a change from last year. And I think those two differences are pretty vital. I don't think they're going to be shell-shocked by anything.
Yeah.
There's just too much experience on both sides of the ball and on their coaching staff, I think, to
But you guys have all sort of touched on it. Early in the game matters. You got to come out hot, right? Yeah. Both sides.
Who sets the tone
Absolutely.
could make
It's
a
hard to
big
come
difference.
back. I mean, that's.
So
we don't
who's
wanna
going
be
to set
digging
the
out of
tone?
We only have a couple minutes until we're going to send it over to Stadium for the start of the broadcast. So I'm going to go down the line. Time to make your pick. Who you got?
Dallas by 1.
Dallas by 1. All right.
And it's nothing personal.
No, everybody's going to take it personal no matter what you say.
I'm going to go New York by 1.
Okay.
New York by 2.
I'll take Bill Nye all day. No, I got New York. I think New York's going to pull away in the fourth quarter. That's what I think.
I'm also going to take New York. I think when you get down to the final nitty-gritty of it, this team plays its best when they're pushed. And, we see them maybe relax against an Indianapolis. They're not going to relax against this Dallas team. I think New York's going to win a close game. So
I think Dallas doesn't have as much to lose. They're going to be a little wilder. We'll see.
There is that undefeated pressure on New York.
Yeah, pressure's on New York. Perfect season on the line.
There is a more pressure, for sure.
Yes, very much so.
Well, final thoughts on this matchup. I mean, is there a chance we could see a blowout, or is that just not? That's out of the question.
I don't think so. I think both teams can pull out their best 7 at any time and go and play their style of ultimate and go on a run. And so I just think that means that if at any moment they both feel like they've got that card that they can play, that'll get them right back in it.
Well, if it's going to happen, it's going to be because of the wind. Somebody's going to get 3-4 points when the wind is slack or the wind's to their advantage. Mm-hmm. And then if that happens, the other team's just got to settle in. This is I'm so excited.
It's going to be super fun.
Yeah.
Bill Nye will be doing the coin toss in just a little bit, and so we're going to get ready to send it over to watchstadium.com, or you can tune in on your cable channel, and it'll be Evan Lepler on the call with Ian Toner and Megan Tormey. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you so much
Charlie.
for including me, guys.
This
This was so
briefly
fun.
at halftime, so we'll look around for some analysis of the first half with the coaches and me and Chuck as well. And Bill, if you're back, we'll love to have you at halftime as well.
I really appreciate this.
But if you're going to go sit in the stands and have a couple of dish-shoot beers, that's
no, we got to work.
very understandable.
Concentrate. All right, you guys, let's have a good game.
Let's have a great game. It's going to be a fun one. Enjoy the game. WatchStadium.com. Thanks so much for joining us here in the pregame. I'm Charlie Eisenhood signing off for our whole crew. We'll see you at halftime.